Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have officially reached a turning point in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And that turning point is we've really just changed the entire dynamic of the world. It literally is different. Everything about the world is different because of this movie. Eternals, that's right, folks, in your lifetime. Even with the current state of Marvel stuff, did anybody think we'd ever be at a point in our lives where we go to our local theater after seeing a Shang-Chi movie and there waiting for us would be the Eternals? Like, that's amazing. In of itself, that's amazing. And I think what's even more amazing is you take an idea that is so big, like the Eternals, and you try to turn that into a feature film for the general audiences. That's hard to do. And you know, this film, I think more than any other film in the Marvel's history, I mean this, in the history of Marvel, this film is very divisive and interesting. And I think some people have compared it to like a DC film in that regard. I think it is kind of like a DC film, not because it's divisive, but because it's really trying to illustrate a certain point of view of gods among Earth and what does it mean to have this humanity towards yourself. It's very much a Zack Snyder idea, and I know Chloe Xiao even said like Zack Snyder was an influence for this, and I don't think it's doing that in the negative way. I think it's actually a great idea when you're dealing with this. So it's the Eternals. It is nobody's favorite comic book characters. It is the D-lister superhero team created by Jack Kirby. Here they are in the Marvel Universe. How do you connect these, thousands of year-old characters to the current mythos of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Turns out you literally rewrite the history of the MCU. And I think that's for the benefit of these characters. Because Jack Kirby was like, we're going to make something insane here. We're going to give you Celestials and Deviants and Eternals. These big, powerful things that are all about destruction and insanity. And when you do that into the live-action movies, it's almost like an impossible challenge to get that right. And I'm going to say this too. This film is not perfect. It is not perfectly paced. It is not perfectly executed. But I did have a positive outcome looking on it. And I think I understand why the critical Rotten Tomatoes score is very low. And of course, Rotten Tomatoes just does like the okay or bad. That doesn't really like get into the review stuff, but there's a lot going on in this film that is hard to process, not because it's like insane or out there so outlandish you don't get it, but it's like these are big swings. And I'd say it's almost such a big swing that it's like not even a swing at all. I'm not going to get too much into the spoilers of that, but it's like this is such a huge idea that almost feels like nothing is really happening because of it. We are establishing who created the world pretty much, who created humanity and the earth, who birthed those creations. That's like a big concept to deal with, but it's almost like it has no impact on anything. That's how big of a concept it is, and that's a really interesting way to look at this. So one of the things that really excited me about this film was Chloe Xiao being attached to it, because I think she's an incredible filmmaker and has a really great visionary style. She talked a lot about the practical sets they use, and they're really filming on location for a lot of this. And I think there's a huge contrast in this film where you see where they are filming on location and where they are using their typical green screen stuff. It's very obvious, which kind of sucks. And it's obvious in the way that every other Marvel movie is obvious about it. If you have a scene where the background is out of focus and it's just the characters in focus, that's a green screen. It's so easy to do. That's what Marvel does now. It's okay-ish, but when you're on set, you feel the weight, you feel the scope, and it looks beautiful. But it also gets bogged down by literally the amount of CG and just nothingness there is there. And sometimes the CG works to the benefit of the show, like the big scopes of space and these beautiful, landscape shots. It looks really good and very poetic and just Jack Kirby-esque. That I think is like my biggest problem with this film, is you don't have the Jack Kirby influence in the way I want to. And I'm a big fan of Jack Kirby. I think he is like one of the grandfathers of the modern comic book. It comes back to his ideas and his art. there are so many bright designs and colors and just concepts that kind of get weighed down. Instead of like these really beautiful ships and like a beautiful discovery of these powers, it's like a big long black ship with no design and just like, you know, bright gold, just like outlines of them that doesn't really spark anything. And the costumes too, they look good. They're a very cool design, but you're stacking that against what Jack Kirby created and you just can't win. You just can't do that because there's no headpieces, there's no like helmets or masks or like capes or anything. It's just let's streamline these to just like a dumb way in the MCU, and it does suck, but it was okay enough where it didn't like take me out of like the experience. I just like this is Jack Kirby's baby at Marvel, you know. It's the Fantastic Four because that's just gorgeous and everything, and then it's these cosmic beings that he wanted to play with, and I feel like this was the time to push for that. We saw like even as like I think Thor Ragnarok has a better looking Kirby aesthetic than this film, and that's kind of sad to say because I think this should be the one of the Kirby aesthetic. The story itself, this is a high concept story. It is akin to things like what Prometheus was doing to the Alien franchise. It's like, who created these things and why are they here? And I think the story itself is very interesting. It's just more like, why are the Deviants back on Earth? What does this have to do with things going on with the Celestials? And I actually like that idea. And I know some people might see the pacing as weird because most of this film is people standing around talking about what they're doing to their god or what their god is doing to them. That's the comic. That to me is like, yeah, that is what these characters do. They don't really like act out or like go crazy sometimes. Yes, there is the typical Marvel schlocky action in here, but I think it's almost better because it's just more personal and intimate. And that's also something I liked about this too. Well, the story is very streamlined as opposed to like the big high concept stuff that we could be dealing with. It is still very ethereal in a sense, but it's also very, you know, about the family, which I think works really well. The family dynamic in here is better than Avengers. I will say that because the Avengers were never really a family. We've seen them, you know, have a dinner party once, they ate shawarma once, but they were a militant team together for most of it. Look at the way just like they just broke up after like the death. You know, nobody really helped Sam out, nobody really helped Wanda out. But you have scenes in here where, you know, Ajax is like, Sprite, you should go find Cersei. You guys are lonely. You should be together. Gilgamesh sacrifices his entire being to protect Fina, and I'm like, that is love. That is caring, and I think that's a really cool thing to deal with. And it just works really well. Now, is the acting perfect? I don't think so. It's no worse than the worst stuff in Marvel. And I know people are like, there's some great acting in Marvel. Typically, I think Marvel acting is pretty easy. And this is coming from a guy who's not an actor, so it could be like perceived as me being an asshole, but it's just easy. And I don't think that's a bad thing. And I do like the high concept stuff in here. I think that works really well. I think it gets better when you see the way the characters' dynamics play out towards all the big stuff. Like, we will get into every character. Let's start with that. So the lead of this is Cersei. I think her storyline is pretty cool. It's not my favorite in the movie, which kind of sucks because I'm like, this is Gemma Chan. Let's see what she got. And she does a good job, but it's kind of just like putting her forward and then not putting her forward in some of the high concept stuff, which I think is kind of interesting to see. One of the best to me was Dane Whitman, Kit Harington. Look, we knew he was going to be Dane, and he nailed it. It's different than Jon Snow. It really is. It's like he perfectly encapsulates the guy who's like willing to roll with the tide and the guy who's just like, this is weird. I think it works perfectly. He did great. Sprite was probably a standout to me. That was the character I was looking forward to the most just because it could be Loki. And they make her different enough where she's not Loki. And there's a really great thing that gets brought up later about like maybe she's like Tinkerbell and Peter Pan. And I'm like, that is enough of that to make that character have an actual connection to this world. And when the stuff eventually happens with her, I think it makes sense and it works really well for what she does. And that leads us to Richard Madden as Icarus. I was like, this was, I think, the one that's going to divide the most people. Like, is this a good performance or not? And I feel like I should specify, Icarus is the stick in the mud. Icarus is literally, he's the weapon, he is the Boy Scout, he is the one who will be flawless to a fault that will eventually lead to his downfall. That is Icarus. Richard Madden does a great job with that. His characterization, I think, makes the film, just because when the inevitability of what he does happens with him, it is just beautiful to see, like, yep, that is it. That leads into this big thing of, like, everybody kind of has their own thoughts and feelings in here, and it works really well. Kumail, who got freaking ripped for this, he looks great. He is Kingo. He's great. The comic relief that you need him to be. It works really well. He does a great job. It's very fun. I do like that he also puts his personal beliefs in, like, their gods in a different way than everybody, where it's kind of just more like, I believe in the Celestials and I believe in Erisham. I'm not going to risk my life just because this could be something different. And I think that's a really cool thing to see. I did enjoy his performance. Makari was a standout. Like, she was great. Lauren was it's just great to see that. And I think that was a very important thing for people to have represented. And she, I think, is going to be the breakout of this, where that's the character we're going to see a lot of going forward, because Makari is probably the coolest Eternal. Honestly, he is in the comics. She is in the movie. Very fun. Angelina Jolie as Athena, very cool. I have to commend Angelina for literally just, like, taking a back seat and just letting, like, the new generation of actors come in and take center stage. Same with Don Lee as Gilgamesh. Like, those two and their dynamic was very fun to see, and you just get, like, the weight of the world lifted on them, and I think it is really intense and fun. I enjoyed that a lot. Druig was another one that I was like, how is this going to play out? Because it could either be very fun, very weird, and he does a great job. I think that worked perfectly. The characterization was strong, and the performance was solid. Same with Fastos. And O'Brien T. Henry was just like, how is this going to go? And that's the one that's the most controversial. His role's the one, it's not being shown in certain countries. Yeah, I mean, it's fine. I mean, Fastos doesn't really have a personality, so do whatever you want with it. I think it works for the most part. No really complaints there. And Ajak, Selma Hayek, she's just Selma Hayek, just doing amazing stuff with everything, and I really did enjoy what she did. So it's hard to get 10 lead characters in an ensemble and give them all the amount of time they need, but I think it did an okay job of doing that. And I know people are like, this is Marvel's biggest challenge, it's so different and weird. It's really not. It does pretty much play out the same. There's the same kind of betrayals and family dynamic, the parental figure in a role of certain things, the certainties into the bigger picture, the certainties to new characters, giving each character their little moment and their send-off to do something cool. It does work pretty good in that way. And I do like that it does feel different. It doesn't go for the jokes every time. There is jokes and there is funny characters, like Kingo and Fastos are pretty funny. But this is more of a story of humanity and, like, coming to terms with what humanity is. And I just think that's pretty cool to see in the Marvel Universe, where we're literally exploring thousands of years of what makes humans special and what makes our planet important in the entire cosmic universe, which is very exciting to see. And it is kind of a love story. It is kind of the love of, like, these Eternals to humanity, but it's also the love story of Cersei and Icarus, which is something I've really wanted to see, because I think we need more romance in our comic book movies. We kind of push it to the sideline for the action and stuff, just so we don't have to, like, bog it down with, like, kissing and stuff. But there is a sex scene in this movie. It is a weak sex scene. It could have been a lot more sexy, I think, because you got two gorgeous people there. Richard and Gemma are not ugly. They are gorgeous, and you just want to, like, lick whipped cream off any part of their body. Like, they are beautiful people. So let's have a little more fun with that sex scene. I like the connotation for what it is, where it's like they're first learning what love is towards each other, so it's a little more just, like, you know, solid as opposed to fluid, which I think is kind of cool. And it is a nice sex scene. It is cool to see. And while this movie is different, I do completely understand why it's not going to be for everybody, but I also would say it is worth exploring. It does have a lot of cool concepts in it. Doesn't work out for everything. Sometimes it's just a little weird. The Celestials are cool to see. Like, they did a good job of, like, portraying the Celestial. So that's a really positive outcome for this. If I had to pick a standout actor, I would probably say it is Kumail Nanjiani. Just because we know who he is. We know the kind of role he does, but he just knocks it out of the park in that. And I would say Angelina Jolie is great too. They're all talented and great to see them. I'm very excited for that cosmic universe to take its full effect. I do want to say this before we wrap up. The post-credit scenes are great. And I'm just going to say, like, the casting for one of the characters in the post-credit scene, it is perfect for the universe, because the actor they got for this role, he is probably the perfect human to personify that role, given real-life events, what the world thinks of him, and just how confident he can be in any situation. So I really like that. I think this movie is very fun. It's just a cool film to explore these ideas and this history. And seeing the Eternals in prominence, I know would make Jack Kirby happy. Whether or not this is a great homage to him, I don't think it is, but it's just nice to see that Jack Kirby's getting some recognition away from Stan Lee in the Marvel Universe, and that makes me happy. So, The Eternals, I am going to give this film a 6 out of 10. Thank you guys for watching this review. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, and I will catch you in the next one. Have fun, stay safe, good luck.